So welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for spending your late evening with us, and thanks for attending Wild Things. Thanks for our conference organizers for doing such a great job. We're delighted to be here to discuss finding the green lining amidst a global pandemic. I'm Melinda Storie. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Geography and Environmental Studies at Northeastern Illinois University. And
hi, I'm Jonathan Hicks. I am an associate professor in the Department of Recreation, Parks, and Leisure Services at Minnesota State University. My emphasis is in natural resource management.
Thank you. Okay. So our plan for tonight is, our purpose tonight is to provide a space to co-create and practice storytelling as a form of restorative leisure and nature connectedness. So the outline of our evening, of our hour together, we're going to introduce you to the concept of exceptional experiences in nature, a little bit of our conceptual framework, if you will. Then we're going to turn it over to you. We're going to tell a couple of stories, and we'd like to hear about how you have connected with nature during the past year. So start to think about maybe some things that you'd like to share with us, and we're very eager to hear your stories, and that's the emphasis of the evening. And then finally, we'll do a little bit of reflection and follow-up.
So when we talk about what an exceptional experience is, there's a certain kind of vagueness to that I think bears exploring. On a basic level, when we talk about what an exceptional experience entails, oftentimes we're talking about kind of three ingredients. And in this case, one of the things we'll end up talking about a lot are emotion, place, and of course the natural world. Emotion is something that historically we've been taught on some level to kind of minimize, that it's irrational and unnecessary, and that when we speak in emotional terms, it's something that can easily be discounted. Our take is a little bit different on that, and there's a lot of research that bears that as well, that we make decisions, some of our most important decisions, with both an infusion of cognition and emotion. And so emotion is something that we're not going to downplay at all tonight. In fact, our hope is that the stories that folks share that are willing to are fused or infused with emotion. When we refer to place, it's what we consider kind of a place attachment. Attachment is a key component to that idea, that a space becomes a place with a capital P when we have that feeling of attachment to it. And one of the things that we know to be true is that the natural world is one of the great facilitators for those experiences. There are typically, we think about these sorts of topics in terms of natural landscapes and cultural landscapes. Cultural landscapes being more of the human-built side of things, natural landscapes being the nature that we know and love that ultimately brings us all here. And then when you throw in kind of unique experiences, oftentimes pursued through recreational pursuits, it's in those circumstances where we can take a standard experience, a conventional experience, and it ultimately becomes exceptional. The results of this, and we're not going to dwell on the research side of this a whole lot tonight. We purposely didn't want to do that. We wanted this to be a night that's very much focused on storytelling. But when we have these exceptional experiences, Mindy and I both do work looking at the kind of ramifications of those experiences. And we know that people have significant shifts in their worldview. They literally see the world differently and more effectively as a result of that. Mindy?
Right on. All right. So what do we know about these exceptional experiences in nature? Here's what we know from the data empirically. We know that these are highly meaningful to those who experience them. They tend to be memorable, accompanied by intense emotion such as awe, wonder, fascination, joy, love. The experiences tend to be very unique to each individual, even though we have found some common themes. They tend to be mostly positive and have positive consequences. Exceptional experiences in nature often include objects of interest, wildlife, birds, non-human animals, water features, and other natural phenomena. They, of course, mostly, although not exclusively, occur in nature or natural settings. And their consequences, as Jonathan mentioned, such as behavioral changes, can be persistent, which is why this is such a promising area of study. And we've both focused on this for our academic work. So there is a trend in some of these exceptional experiences in nature in the research that participants are experiencing this novel and sometimes challenging times in their lives. And these experiences in some ways help them get through hardships. So we thought that having an overwhelming challenge, and we're all very familiar with this picture now, such as COVID, in life might impact the way and the mechanisms by which we can understand these exceptional experiences. So exceptional experiences in nature may have the potential to heal, restore, comfort, and or maintain us in this difficult time.
A few years ago, when I was researching and interviewing folks about wildlife-inspired awe, someone told me a story. She suggested that the only reason she went to church was so she could talk to her neighbors about the wildlife that she'd seen that week. And one of the things, to me, it's an example that I go back to all the time because I think it's a delightful reminder of the value of storytelling. That by telling stories, I think a lot of us, when we think about being told stories, we think about childhood and, something that's seemingly innocuous or unimportant. But storytelling is something that ultimately connects us as people. And the stories that we tell about our pursuits, our leisure pursuits, are particularly significant, we believe. Leisure, recreation have the ability to be restorative. By its very definition, I like to think that if you're doing it right, it should be restorative, that it should bring us something that we didn't have previously, be it a new ability or a new perspective. Regardless, the stories that we tell about those experiences pursuing leisure help us better understand and explain these extraordinary experiences.
All right, so Jonathan and I are each going to share an experience from our lives during the past year. While we're doing that, we would like to hear from you in the chat. So here is the prompt, and we would like to encourage you to share. We know that we haven't asked you to prepare anything, so this is an informal sharing of short stories. We want to get in as many as possible, 1 to 5 minutes at the most. So tell us your story about how you've interacted with nature in whatever way you define nature during COVID. So if you're interested in sharing, you'll have a couple of minutes now and throughout the next half an hour to just post your interest in the chat. Click in the chat area, and our moderators will message you a code to enter backstage, and you'll get instructions once you get backstage. So I'm going to just ask one of our moderators to explain this process, please.
Yeah, so Mindy just about had it. It's not very much more complicated than that. Just indicate that you'd like to share your story in the chat. I will private message you, and you'll see that little paper airplane up by your profile icon. It'll have that little red notification next to it. And that will be a message from me with the backstage link. And once you click on that link, Make sure you close your other stage window if it opens a new tab, and then request to share your video and audio, and then we will be happy to welcome you up here with us. So I think that should explain it. But I'll be in the chat if anyone seems to have any issues with that. So yeah.
Thank you, Katie. I see a secret. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and come back to the chat when I can, but we're going to share a couple stories as we're getting folks settled backstage to share your stories. So I'm going to go first and then invite Jonathan to tell his story. So as we step outside our home, I'm overcome with the breath of fresh air, a needed respite from our screen-filled morning. I immediately glance around to ensure no other humans are nearby as we make our way to the street to walk to the park. My 5-year-old son is visibly relieved to be outside, but in the undercurrent of his chatter, I begin to hear some hints of uncertainty. We make it to the park. A few other humans are within eyesight, but we quickly look away and make a wide arc around them. We find our way to our secret woods, and once assured that we have it to ourselves, we finally let ourselves breathe deep breaths and relax into the trees. We trudge around, we jump, we laugh, we play. We tell ourselves how lucky we are to have this little secret woods to explore and enjoy. What about the people who don't have this, we wonder? All of a sudden, the last week crashes down on me. I'm looking up at the magnificent trees, feeling the hint of snow flurries, listening to the eerie quiet of no children playing. Not much traffic on the nearby thoroughfare. I now know the current tragedy does not sound like chaos, but seeps into our reality as silence. The kind of silence filled with absence. The kind of silence that's given me the building anxiety I've had all week. I can physically feel myself relax as I reconnect with nature. Multiple thoughts seem to stream out of me. What do we know? Not much. My power comes from knowledge. How will I handle the unknown? What if I can't protect my loved ones? What if I can't continue my work? I am a planner. This is unanticipated, although part of me has mentally prepared for moments like these. Then something happens. The earth starts to bring me into its breath. The stream of thoughts depletes. Stop. Breathe. Look up. Let go. I start to notice the tiny details in our secret forest, the way the trees are arranged around our secret hiding place, giving us a tiny glimpse of the water beyond. The way the ground cover absorbs our soft footfalls, the way the absence of leaves allows us to see the small group of deer hiding nearby, the way the wildlife still persists, the smell of the leaves and the earth beneath, the beauty, and I smile. I haven't smiled in a while. Then, Mom, take my picture. And here's the picture I took. This is a frequent request from my son, so I oblige and am relieved to see him smiling so widely and enjoying our secret forest, our sanctuary. This was on COVID lockdown, March 16th, 2020, day 1.
My story comes much after day 1. This is Thanksgiving Day in the Lamar Valley in Yellowstone. It had been like it had been for everybody else along parts of 2 school years. We lost the end of one, and the beginning of the new one looked unlike any other. And so my wife and I escaped to the one place we thought we wouldn't see a ton of people. As it turns out, we didn't. What we did see was a lot of beauty and a lot of wildlife. The research that I do, as I alluded to earlier, is on wildlife-inspired awe, something that seems to have a long-lasting positive effect in people's lives. And it's not a random pursuit. It's something that I've been fortunate to feel over and over again in my life, something that helps me feel connected to the landscapes around me, even the ones that I don't know very well, like Yellowstone. But it's Thanksgiving Day, and I spot tracks in the snow, and every so often, a couple hundred yards up, we see a flash of red. And we track this little fox for 20, 30 minutes before finally letting it go on its way. And as we're standing there in the valley, just kind of looking around, taking it all in, taking a breath, feeling the gratitude to be there and to be able to breathe deeply, what Abby called that sweet, lucid air. This little fox had doubled back on itself and walked up within a few feet of us. It paused for a moment, looked at me like you can see there, and continued on its way. And it was this kind of wonderful feeling of catharsis, and escape and beauty, and something that I didn't realize I needed so desperately until I experienced it. And the energy of this fox is something I've carried with me in the days since, as a reminder that even as we see tragedy upon tragedy upon tragedy, that there's beauty there, and that keeps me going.
Thank you so much. I love this photo too. All right. So now it's your turn. I think we've had a couple of volunteers so far, and I want to encourage those who haven't volunteered to please think about how you have interacted with nature in the past year or so. And again, no pressure. This is a really informal sharing. It's a safe space, and we encourage you to share what you can with us. It doesn't have to be some extraordinary top of the mountain moment. It can be about everyday nature for sure. So moderators, do we have anyone ready to go?
I have sent the link to a couple. Oh yeah, so Will is backstage. Will, if you could click to share your video and your audio, we will get you up here. You're definitely in the right place. Marjorie is back here too, so whichever one of them I see pop up in the docket first, I'll let them on. It should be a blue button that says share video and audio near the upper right corner. Unless it says it's full. I'm going to boot Brandon off the stage. He's back here. Let's try that one more time. Maybe now you can see the, oh yeah, here they are. Okay, so I'm letting Will on stage. Might take 1 second.
So while we're waiting for Will, we started to observe, and there have been just this rush to get out to nature, to get to nature-inspired places during the COVID lockdown. So that's what kind of inspired this as well. So think about that, and maybe your place in that, either as a steward or a manager or a practitioner in the field, and maybe dealing with some situations that you haven't been familiar with yet. I'm going to turn things over to Will. Will, you have the floor to tell your story. Thank you so much.
Oh my gosh, well, it's not going to be as good as yours, but I'll tell a story. So of course, if we remember back to, I think you said March 2020, you know, it's hard to even remember how quick the pandemic hit us. And when we first got the initial notification from the governor and from the powers down,
Will, I think your sound just cut out. Oh, is it me?
We can't hear you, Will. You're muted.
Great Wild Things shirt. Wow.
That is a great Wild Thing shirt. All right. So while we're working on our technical difficulties with Will, we definitely want to hear from you. Can we invite Marjorie back, perhaps?
Yeah, I'll get Marjorie on here too. She's also waiting.
And then Will, don't go anywhere. We'll come back to you.
Yeah.
Hi, Marjorie. Welcome, and thank you so much for being willing to share your story.
Sure. Can you hear me and see me and everything? Cool. Do you want me to just start sharing? Okay. So when the pandemic hit, I was a full-time student and also working full-time as a restaurant manager. And I think my initial response was just work as hard as I can to ignore reality. So we shut down the restaurant, but we're still doing takeout. And I was just there 10 hours a day, 7 days a week, until all of a sudden I just obviously hit a wall. And one day I just got on my bike, and I live in Logan Square, and I just started to ride. I was like, this is how far I can go. And I was able to go pretty far. I got to the lakefront path, just went south and just hit so much greenery and the lake just next to me, and just almost like silence, because you're kind of far off of the traffic and everything. And it just changed everything. And I just started to make sure I had at least one day a week where I can just get on my bike and ride, like the Queen song. But just being part of nature and just being thrown into basically like wildlife, if you can call it that, on the lakefront, just flipped a switch in my head. And the more time I spent in nature, I would go like Northerly Island. I would go north up to Evanston, and just until I felt like I needed to turn back. The more I did these bike rides, the more I realized, like, why am I doing this to myself? Why am I prioritizing like working so hard? And paycheck is good, but like there's so much more to life than that. And ultimately I ended up quitting that job and taking it much more slow, and definitely making more time for bike rides in nature in any capacity, even if it's just shoveling snow. But yeah, I think that's my COVID experience with nature, definitely coming out the bright side, I guess. So.
Thank you so much for sharing your story, Margie. It's very helpful, and it's very local too, which I love. Experience that a lot of us have. Maybe not in all the snow, but Will, we're going to come back to you. I've heard that the system does not like your headphones, maybe your earpods. So maybe try without those. And you're going to have to unmute yourself and try again. There's a little microphone at the bottom of your screen.
You might have to refresh your page and rejoin now that you've taken out your headphones. But it should just let you back in, and we can, yeah. Yeah, if there's anyone else who'd like to come on stage too. Kathy Garness, I don't know if you're still out there and interested in coming on. I can send you the link. And yeah, okay, Will is back.
Yeah, that would be much appreciated, Kathy. And I see a couple of people have shared some stories in the chat. We appreciate that as well.
Hey,
welcome back.
Now?
Yes.
Well, that solves the problem. This is just an amazing thing. And I was going to say, Melinda, I'm not going to beat your story or Jonathan's or who else just spoke? Anyways, this Hopin platform is a pretty amazing thing, and I'm glad this is all working. We're going to work this out. So I do have a story, and I actually started writing it down because I know that it helps to script our narrative. But I was trying to think back to when the pandemic began, and it's almost hard to think about that. It seems like years ago already. But around, I guess in March 2020, like you said, when it began, the governor made the initial stay-at-home orders, and I had been
We lost you again, Will.
Oh no.
The system automatically muted you. I don't know why. You're muted now. We get a little further each time.
I know.
All right, so hopefully we have Kathy coming back.
Yeah, I have sent her the link.
I'd also be curious if any of you are managing volunteers. I know that there are many folks who are working out in quote unquote natural areas. If you've experienced any differences or shifts or changes that you think would be good to share with us, that would be also quite interesting, I think, to see how you've noticed that people are interacting with the natural area where you find yourself. Okay, Will, you're back, but you're still muted.
Well, I'll try to help you a little bit more backstage. We have one other person who's waiting to come on, Bob Fisher, so I'll let him on. Oh, and Kathy's here too. So let's try Bob. Kathy, I'll keep you on hold, and we'll try to get you some help backstage.
Thank you, Katie. We didn't quite know how this would go, so we're all learning. Thank you for your patience.
My best, by the way, that's not me.
Hey, Bob, we can hear you loud and clear. Go ahead and share your story. Thanks for sharing.
Okay. This will be a very quick one. I'm part of a group that does hawk watching at Green Valley Forest Preserve in DuPage County. And because of the conditions up there, we hawk watch on top of a mountain, a closed landfill. And because of the conditions up there, we're able to do a hawk watch as a group. I mean, we keep appropriate distancing and so forth. And it's really fascinating. We get up there, and I think we all share the same point of view that when we get up 200 feet above the surrounding landscape, our, shall we say, daily problems kind of fade away. And the raptors that we see take center stage. And it's just a wonderful feeling. It's like living a wow moment pretty much constantly. And one of the more interesting parts of it is that there's a pair of bald eagles that nest along the DuPage River just adjacent to the hill. And they frequently come up and fly around and look at us, looking at them, looking at us, et cetera, et cetera. So I think I consider myself, and I think if you asked all of our other hawk watchers the same thing, we'd all say that we felt so fortunate to be able to get out and do something and share the experience while at the same time not having to think too much about all the issues connected with COVID. So that's kind of my wow moment.
Thank you so much, Bob, for sharing that. And I love that you're calling it a wow moment. In the literature, we see things like aha moments and moments of epiphanies and awe-inspired moments. I love the wow moment, and I love your sense of gratitude. We see that quite a bit, a sense of smallness, of connectedness, and I really appreciate the object of interest too. The birding, and I've become acquainted with some online birding communities during the COVID lockdown, and found that to be incredibly comforting. And we even have a local one now where I live, where we all talk about the birds that we see every day. So I really appreciate your story. Thank you so much. I've heard that Will is going to share his story with us in the chat. So I really appreciate that. I also see that Jeff has submitted a story in the chat as well, and I appreciate these chat stories, and we could come back to some of those as well as Renee and Colleen. Colleen, thank you so much for sharing. We really appreciate that. We have Kathy with us now. Welcome, Kathy. It's great to see you. Go ahead and share with us.
Kathy, can you hear us okay?
Good to see you too.
Oh, there.
So a lot of you know that I'm a steward at 2 different sites in Lake County. Can you hear me? Great. I can, thank you. So it was really kind of upsetting to have.
Kathy, I think
It was
there's
kind of upsetting to have our work days put on hold. And it wasn't until sometime a little later in the year that we were able to get together as a stewardship community and go out. There's a very special site, very special area in my Lake County site, Granger Woods, that I have to have a little backstory about. It was what we called Mirkwood Forest. It was, the canopy was so closed, nothing really grew under it. It was just bare dirt. And so several years ago, I think about 4 years ago, Lake County was able to secure some the resources to open up the canopy to about, I would say, a 20% light situation, so that it was still it was a woodland, not yet a savanna, but finally there was some possibility of some growth. And where we had seen absolutely nothing over the course of the next few years, all the spring flora returned with the exception of hepatica and bloodroot. And this was really exciting. But this year we went out and socially distanced with our masks and our seed collecting bags. And one of my stewardship volunteers, Paula, calls me over and she says, "Kathy, what's this?" And I said, "Holy cow, Paula, you found..." She says, "Is this an orchid?" And I said, "Yes, this is an orchid. Now, I'm not going to tell you which one. It's like, because it's not, it was a county record. Now, Jerry Wilhelm, the author of The Flora of the Chicago Region, considers it non-native, inventive to our region. But for me, it was so exciting. It was real validation of the work that our stewardship group had been doing and the heavy lifting that the Lake County Forest Preserve had done in believing in the quality of this site, that to the point that they would invest substantial resources in opening this area up to a point where it was, there were species that we hadn't seen there since 1974, when the first floristic inventory done by the Illinois Natural Areas Inventory. So we were doing our happy dance, very socially distant happy dance. And then a month or two later, we were out in a different area of the same preserve. And Paula again says, "Kathy, what's this?" And I looked at it, and it's an aster. And I don't know asters. I know my orchids, but I don't know my asters. And I said, "Paula, I have absolutely no idea, because it doesn't look like anything that I could really identify easily." It was the dark blue of New England aster, but it was this teeny little thing, like an aster, like a heath aster or something. And I said, "Okay, well, I don't know." But I took a piece of it home to ID, and I had the opportunity that week to show it to Jerry Wilhelm. And he said, "Oh, that's Symphytrichum amethystinum." And he said, "Well, that's a county record. We don't have, that it's never been found in Lake County." I'm like, so my next question was, how do you even know that? I mean, how do you keep all this in your head? And then I went to the book, and sure enough, it had never been seen. It's a natural hybrid between, I forget, and New England aster. So this was a real validation. It was a very important validation of the stewardship work that we've been doing. And it just gave us hope. It just gave us hope and the energy to continue doing what we're doing. And I think as stewards and stewardship volunteers, I think moments like that are so important.
Thank you so much, Kathy. That was a wonderful story. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on stage and talk to us. I love the experience of hope and
that's all.
Thank you. Thank you. The experience of hope and that experience of a reciprocity between you and the rest of nature in community, right? So a lot of us do volunteer work and are around the same group of folks and experience some of these exceptional experiences in nature together as a community. And I think that that's really special, especially given the group of wild things and what a history we all have together. And it's wonderful that we're able to be here in this odd but very invigorating place tonight. So do we have anyone else, Katie, right now?
Yeah, I'm in the process of sending the link to Monica right now.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Monica. Jonathan, any insights while we're waiting for Monica?
I was actually about to ask you a question. Mindy, you and I both work with college-age students on a daily basis, and I'm curious just kind of what experiences you have had interacting with that demographic, who some of whom are here with us tonight, I've noticed, but I myself have seen students often struggling to cope, struggling to make sense of taking classes in a platform that looks a little bit like this conference, quite frankly. That day in, day out of that can be quite difficult. Have you worked with any students that have had any of these kind of positive experiences, or who have found themselves being more drawn to the out of doors as a result of this kind of technological infusion into their day-to-day lives?
Yeah, great question. I have observed that, and especially this term. So last term I taught an interpretation class, and we were learning how to give interpretive programming. And it was I thought it was going to be such a challenging class to do online or to do remotely like we are now. And it turned out to be one of the best groups of students that I had, so creative and really able to get out and do some of this on their own and share their experiences with us, which was really therapeutic for me. And I think it was therapeutic to the rest of the class as well. And now I'm starting to hear from my conservation psychology students about their environmental autobiographies and all of the transition of their ecological selves from pre-pandemic, growing up and throughout their lives. But I've noticed that folks are finding nature or natural elements in their domestic environments as a way to cope. So I definitely have, and I'd love to hear from you as well. And then we'll invite Monica to tell her story.
I think I have been, certainly last fall, but even since, I've been repeatedly struck by just some of the not unexpected for me necessarily, but for students, to all of a sudden feel a little bit lost and to have difficulty putting into words why they felt that way. And in many, many, kind of unofficial therapy sessions with them in the last year, one of the themes that I've seen over and over again is that they're lacking two things, one of which is social engagement and being able to do all of the things that inspired them in some cases to come to college in the first place. And I think a lot of students in that age group get a bad rap and are accused of wanting to party constantly and do these things. But the other things that they lost were like doing laundry with students on their floor, or having a random impromptu lunch with someone down the hall that they haven't met yet. Those are things that they've lost too. And so watching them trying to negotiate the idea that that they're missing something that they haven't even fully conceptualized yet, I think it's hard to watch, and it's difficult to offer tools to deal with that. But the tool that I keep going back to with my students has been the out of doors, and I'm very fortunate to teach in resource management where we can meet outside and do so safely. It's not ideal. We have to be a little bit more loud than I'd prefer we were, but we've still had opportunities to get out and breathe fresh air and get our hands dirty a little bit and renew some of those bonds, not just with each other, but with the earth. It's been really neat to see students connect with seemingly mundane landscapes, with blades of grass. It doesn't have to be a national park, it can just be the little bit of grass in front of their apartment. And to see them talk about being more apt to take notice of caterpillars and butterflies and things that they might have otherwise missed. It's forced them to slow down in a lot of different ways. And I've taken great encouragement from that, actually, to hear so many more students really being able to, whether they felt it before or not, to be able to put into words the relationship that they have with the earth. I find that incredibly encouraging.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Yes, I think we have Monica ready to storytell.
Oh, she is here. Oh, great. She just popped up. Okay, let's see if this works.
And we have a couple of comments in the chat about other folks who have experiences at universities and colleges. Welcome, Monica. We'd love to hear your story. Thank you so much.
Hello. At the beginning of the pandemic, a couple months into the shutdown, people started posting pictures of, the wild taking over places and the beauty of the air quality and everything. And I kept encountering this little fox. And I do natural healing work where I encourage people to connect with the spirits of the animals or plants, to really connect them with nature. And we found that, because now we take 3 walks a day because I'm working from home. So the dog and I would walk, and we found that there was a coyote coming across from, we think, probably the cemetery, and then the fox coming the other way. And we would find them meeting in the empty school and church parking lot every night. And because the first night we thought the fox was following us. And so we stopped. And actually I said sit and stay to my dog, who did not do that, but the fox did, which I thought was totally entertaining. But it was just that beauty where I was like, why don't we just, nobody's using these buildings. Why don't we just open them and let the animals all inhabit them and just abandon everything to nature? So that was where I was hoping we were going with the shutdown. Thanks.
Right on. Another fox story. And thank you so much, Monica. It's funny how we have some synchronicity here just in this session. And I was mentioning to Jonathan when we were preparing for this, and I saw his picture, and how fox is supposed to symbolize that something magical in your life is happening. So thank you to all of you for sharing your stories, and we're going to give you a link in a moment if you'd like to share with us some more. I am going to put my slides back up here. Katie, I just want to double check with you. We're good with, we don't have anyone else left in the waiting room, right?
Right. Yeah, we're all good.
Okay. Okay. Okay, I'm going to turn this over to Jonathan.
Thanks, Mindy. So first of all, thank you, everyone, both in the chat, to those of you who went out of your way to come up on stage. I know that's no small thing to ask, and to be willing to kind of open up and be vulnerable and to let us into your world is incredibly powerful. And I know Mindy and I are incredibly grateful to you for doing that. Thank you so much. One of the things that connects Mindy and I in our research is we particularly, as we've not been subtle about, we find a lot of value in stories, and we love to listen on a basic level. And I think that's the appeal of a session like this is it becomes really fun for us to not only to be up here on stage, but to interact with you and to hear the way that your world has been influenced in the last year, and to be reminded of some of the common threads that we all experience, regardless of our geographic location or so many other variables. I wrote down some key words as everybody spoke between both the chat and those of you who were kind enough to come up on stage. And the two words that I wrote down most frequently were escape and hope, which on a basic level, I think makes a lot of sense. We have collectively experienced a trauma in the last year, and to acknowledge it and in some ways embrace it as such has great value. I think the greater value is in sharing it, in looking at each other and speaking with each other with great empathy. That's such a healthy way to try to live. I'm also struck by, though, this desire not just to escape, but to find hope. And so many of us found that in plants, in wildlife, in sunlight, in breezes, in aromas. I loved the countless, seemingly countless different ways that you all expressed the ways that you found hope on a basic level, and they're all unique, and we're all kind of the same too. And that's, I think, a very powerful pattern to find. In terms of me kind of wrapping up my component here before I let Mindy bring us home, I think that there is something really powerful about these narratives, to recognize that on some level we are not alone, to recognize that we are tied together by the natural world. And because of that, I think to be reminded of how much more fighting we need to do. I don't think it's coincidence that so many of you were either counting wildlife or working on stewardship restoration projects, doing things not just for yourself, but for the betterment of the earth. And to be reminded of those connections, I suspect has reinvigorated a lot of us despite the obvious trauma. So thank you, everybody here, for doing this incredibly important work, and thank you for being kind enough to talk about it.
That was beautifully said. Thanks, Jonathan. So what can we do with all of this in general? This practice of sharing narratives gives us, and placemaking can influence what we know about the many benefits of recreation and nature connectedness. It can give us some insights about possible avenues for environmental educators and interpreters, conservation managers. And finally, we can better understand conservation psychology, which is the study of reciprocal relationships between humans and the rest of nature. So that's kind of the so what implications related mostly to the research, but I think in general, as Jonathan so eloquently stated, we can share our common experiences, and that's such a powerful thing to do in a time of chaos. So I am going to put this in the chat. Let me make sure I'm in the right place here. So we would like to very much thank Katie, Brandon, and Linda for all of your help setting this up. And for all of you wild things in the audience, thanks for sticking with us this late. And we left a few minutes for questions and answers. I would like you to use this Google form, if you would, as a place, pretend we're all together and I'm sending around a sign-up sheet. If you'd like us to contact you to share your story about nature and COVID, once you have some of these thoughts roving around in your brain, you might think, oh, I do have a story, and we'd love to hear it. So if you're interested in sharing your story, this is just an interest form. It's not to share the story yet, but we'll connect you. We'll contact you and invite you to share your stories with us. So thank you so much for your attention, and thank you to Jonathan. And I'm going to open the floor for questions now. If you'd like to put your questions in the chat, we would love to address them. You're welcome. I'm seeing so many familiar names in the chat. It's nice. Kind of sad that I can't see all of you. I see a lot of thanks. Any questions we can answer?
Oh, Linda just posted any stories about overuse of preserves. I guess I can sort of speak to that. I did notice a lot of trail widening this spring. I frequent a preserve that gets really wet in the spring, and water might start pooling in the trails where we haven't already sort of built little bridges or things for people to walk around the water. And that was sort of sad to see, but also you're happy that people are coming to enjoy and learn about the places that you appreciate and work. So I think I think my community found like maybe sort of a happy medium. Like people came and learned about the stewardship that we were doing, and sort of learned about the impact that they might be having, like coming to the preserves more often. And I don't think it was all bad. Certainly a lot of people learned a lot because of their use of the preserves, and that was good. But yeah.
Thanks, Katie. I'd like to invite Jonathan to address this question from a recreation management perspective, because this has been an issue. I think it's probably exacerbated during COVID when folks want to get out, and especially like in some of the larger like national parks and places of interest in the country. So how do we kind of deal with this need to get into nature or a natural environment with the depletion or overuse of some of these vulnerable places?
That's a great question, and Katie, what you spoke about has been felt at every level of organized outdoor recreation in the country. Every national forest, every national park, every wilderness area, every state park. These are spaces that have had, in some cases, their visitation double, particularly during the course of last summer when, as you got into the middle of summer, people thought that things were getting better. They thought it was going away. They thought this was dealt with. It was warm out. And we saw people flocking to these spaces in numbers that are quite literally unparalleled, and that we're never fully going to grasp how many folks were using our natural spaces during that time. In terms of what you do about it, there are certainly things that can be done in terms of solidifying trails, reducing issues related with trail compaction and subsequent runoff. I would argue, though, that there is a basic problem with how we do math when it comes to this. And by that, I mean, we have, really since the time of Teddy Roosevelt, or certainly Stephen Mather, we have measured our success by visitation. Simultaneously, we also know that crowding and overuse are two of the most significant kind of constraints or issues that impact people's positive experiences in these spaces. And so on one hand, we can look at having, quote unquote, too many people in a space and say, well, one, this is successful, and two, it's failing. And both things are ultimately true. When you have conversations with managers, I know that they grapple with that. On a basic level, I am inclined to think it's an argument for more green space. If we are so successful in some of these spaces and have such high visitation, I think it's a strong argument for additional green space. And especially as we think about the relationship between the out of doors and the social justice movement, and democratizing outdoor spaces, and making sure that people have access to them. This is something that we're going to have to continue to be thoughtful about. And at some point, the metric of more people equals more better is probably going to have to be adjusted.
Yeah, thank you. The same thought occurred to me with access, and kind of there's a little bit in the chat about building a new population to volunteer some of these spaces, and the more people we have connecting with nature and caring for nature, we know that leads to eventually, with most folks, more responsible relationship to nature and more environmentally responsible behavior that translates into other aspects of their lives. So I think that we do need to be cognizant of the vulnerability of some of these areas, and many of you have experienced overpopulation of people in your special places, and we know that we have a lot of emotional attachments to our special places, so that can be jarring. But I agree with Jonathan that we can use this as a momentum to argue for more green space, argue for more justice, more access, in how people are able to spend time in nature. And I think I'm going to end there. Thank you all so much. This has been great. We're very grateful to you, and good night.